So getting started with Backstage plugin. So let's look at creating your Backstage application. So the audience for this tutorial is the developers and administrators of Backstage instance. It's not required, although recommended to have a basic understanding of yarn and npm before starting this guide. So as a summary, this guide walks you through how to get started creating your very own Backstage customizable application. So this is the first step in evaluating, developing, or demoing a Backstage application. So by the end of this tutorial, you'll have a standalone Backstage installation running locally with SQLite database and demo content. So to be clear, this is not a production-ready installation, and it does not contain information specific to your organization. So if you're planning to use this, so the prerequisites for this is um, this tutorial also assumes a basic understanding of working on a Linux-based operating system and have some experience with the terminal, specifically these commands like npm, yarn, and so on. So access to a Unix-based operating system is essential, such as Linux, Mac OS, or Windows subsystem for Linux. So a GNU-like build environment available at the command line. For example, on Debian or Ubuntu, you will want to have the make and build essential packages installed. On Mac OS, you'll want to have uh, the command xcode select installed to get the xcode command line build tooling in place. So an account with elevated rights to install these dependencies is also required. The utilities like curl or wget should be installed, and Node.js active long-term support release should be installed using one of these methods, using either NVM, so which is the recommended approach. So installing the NVM and installing and changing the node version with the NVM will be helpful. Node version 20 is a good starting point. This can be installed using nvm install long-term support LTS/iron. So this is one approach, and there is binary download also available. So we need a package manager such as npm. Using node source packages, also you can install these node dependencies. So we need yarn installed, and Backstage currently uses yarn 4.4.1. Once you have ran core pack enabled, you'll want to then run yarn set version to 4.4.1. So, and if needed, we need a Docker installation and Git installation. So if the system is not directly accessible over your network, the following ports need to be opened, such as 3000 and 7007. So this is quite uncommon unless you are installing in a container or a VM or a remote system. So let's look at creating your own Backstage application. So let's create a Backstage application. So the Backstage app we'll be creating will only have demo data until we set up integrations with your specific data sources. So to install the Backstage standalone app, we will make use of npx. So we'll use the terminal. So npx is a tool that comes pre-installed with Node.js. Let's check node version. Okay, it's long-term support version, and lets you the npx is a tool that comes pre-installed with Node.js, and it lets you run commands straight from npm or other registries. Before we jump into running the command, let's chat about what it does. So this command will create a new directory with a Backstage app inside it. So the wizard will ask you for the name of the app, and this name will be created as subdirectory in your current working directory. So let's proceed with the setup. So first of all, we would need npx at backstage create app latest. This will prompt a set of questions for you. Okay, and we need a name of. It will ask you the name of the application. So let's choose my backstage app. So it will install all the dependencies and gives you the control. Inside that directory, it will generate all the files and folder structures needed for you to run the Backstage application. So general folder structure will look like something like app and app config, catalog info YAML, and packages on packages. So inside the packages, there will be app unpacking. So once this installation is done, we can take a look into those directory structure. So now the installation is done and we can check the directory structure here. The app will have app config YAML and then catalog info YAML and then package.json. And inside the packages, we have app and backend. So the app config YAML, this is the main configuration file for the application. So we'll we'll go deep into this configuration, how it's done later. And catalog info YAML is actually the catalog entities descriptors. So we'll look into this more in detail at a later section. And package.json, root package JSON for the project. This is the package JSON. And be sure that you don't add any npm dependencies here, as they probably should be installed in the intended workspace rather than in the root package.json. So inside the packages, uh, learner leaf packages or workspaces will be there. These are all learner packages. And everything here is going to be a separate package managed by learner. So packages slash app is a fully functioning Backstage front-end application that acts as a good starting point for you to get to know the Backstage application. And the backend, we include a backend that helps cover features such as authentication, software catalog, software templates, and tech docs, amongst other things. So now that we know what it does, let's run it and see. And for us to run this, so we already did npx backstage create app latest. This does create the application, and this may take a few minutes to fully install everything. So as we have seen already, don't stress it. If the loading seems to be spinning nonstop, there is a lot going on in the background. So if this fails on the yarn install step, it's likely that you'll need to install some additional dependencies which are used to configure isolated VMs. So you can find out more in their requirements section and then run yarn install manually again after you have completed those steps. So let's run the Backstage application. Your Backstage app is fully installed and ready to be run. So now that the installation is complete, you can go to the application directory and start the app using the yarn start command. So let's go to the application directory, my Backstage app. And the yarn start command will run both the front end and back end as separate processes named as 0 and 1 in the same window. So we change directory to my Backstage app. Let's start the server. Here again, there is a small wait for the front end to start up. Once the front end is built, your browser window should automatically open. So when you see the message 0 or back compiled successfully, you can navigate directly to localhost 3000 to see your Backstage application. You can start exploring Backstage application. Right here. And let's go to 3000 home. And here it is. And let's just do a quick recap on what we did. This tutorial walked you through how to deploy Backstage using npx backstage create app command. That command creates a new directory that holds your new Backstage application. That app is currently only configured for development purposes as it is using an in-memory database and contains some demo data. So the next steps are choose the correct next steps for your user role. If you're likely to be deploying and managing a Backstage instance for your organization, look through the admin section. If you're likely to be developing on or for Backstage, take a look through the developer section. So admin section includes deploying to production, let's say setting up authentication, configuring database, deploying with Docker, deploying with Kubernetes, and so on. So configuring Backstage includes adding plugins, customizing the theme, populating the homepage, and so on. For developers, using your Backstage instance, logging into uh, logging into Backstage, register a component, create a new component, and so on is the next logical step for developers. So with that, we'll jump into configuring database. So, so the audience for this section of the tutorial is for the admins. So as a summary, this section walks you through how to set up a Postgres database to how to host your Backstage data. It assumes you already have a scaffolded Backstage app from following the current process. So by the end of this section, you will have a working Postgres database hooked up to your Backstage installation. So for the prerequisites, let's say this guide assumes a basic understanding of working on a Linux-based operating system and have some experience with the terminal, specifically the commands like apt-get, psql, yarn, and so on. And I'm going to assume that you have access to a Linux-based operating system, such as Linux, macOS, or WSL. So an account with elevated rights into installing prerequisites on your operating system is required. If the database is not hosted on the same server as the Backstage app, the Postgres port needs to be accessible. That is, the default port is 5432 or 5433. So let's look at installing and configuring PostgreSQL. If you're already installed PostgreSQL and create a schema and user, we can skip to the next step. Let's install PostgreSQL and get it set up for our Backstage app. First, we need to actually install the SQL server. So I've already installed the PostgreSQL. So I'm not going to do that as of now. So usually in a Linux-based environment, you will use sudo apt-get install PostgreSQL. To test if your database is working, sudo -u postgres psql command can be used. You should see a very welcome message like a PostgreSQL prompt. So I'm going to start my Postgres admin interface. So if you are using Windows, you can use this PG admin. So for this tutorial, we're going to use the existing Postgres user, which is Postgres. The next step is to set the password for this user. I've already set the password. So you can set your own password while installing the PostgreSQL server. So I have this server. Let me delete all these databases and recreate. So I've already done a little bit of work on Backstage. That's why these databases are available here. We can delete. Sorry. You can see the Postgres admin interface here. So because I've already worked with Backstage, there are databases already created here. I'll delete these and then we'll do fresh, freshly create database. If you want to explore what all data is available in this database, you can actually use this. We go to the tables in the schema. You can select a table and explore the data in it, just like this. Okay, let's anyway delete this and then start from scratch. Okay, good. Okay, that's enough database administration to get started. Then let's configure Backstage to use the Postgres installation here. So let's go to the interface. Inside here, use your favorite editor to open app config. So in this case, I'm using the VS Code itself. So inside the backend section, there is database section, which will be using, as of now, it's using memory in-memory database, which is SQLite 3. Let's change this to PostgreSQL. So in order to do that, we need to remove this and add a new in here. So client is going to be same. Okay, Postgres. Connection properties has to be given like this. Host, let's say dollar express host. So there are different ways to configure this. And as of now, I'm going to use environment variables for configuring these properties. Port is this. User should be specified as Postgres user. In our case, it is our Postgres user. And we'll use Postgres password. Okay, that's about it. The flower braces here, syntax denotes this that this is an environment variable. Specifically, Postgres post the URL or IP address to access your PostgreSQL installation. If you have installed Postgres locally, this will be most likely 127.0.0.1, and Postgres port, the port to access your Postgres database on. If you have installed Postgres locally, this will be 5432 or 5433. In our case, it is 5432. So you'll understand that when we are installing the Postgres. And Postgres user is going to be the user from the SQL command options. So in this case, the username is Postgres, and the password is the one that you set in the SQL installation steps. So this for now, I will use my password. And when filling these out, you have two choices. So use environment variables when you launch Backstage, either using an environment variable injector like .env CLI or env command, or loading the variables directly with export Postgres equal to something and so on. So replace the entire Postgres section string, this section. The second approach is to replace this entire thing with the value you identified earlier. So this is the less secure option, but worth doing it if you don't have much experience with environment variables. So in this case, I'm going to hard code these. So I'll just copy paste this part, comment out and copy, and I'm going to use 127.0.0.1, and there I'll use 5432. This is going to be Postgres, and I'm going to use my password. So if you opt for the second option of replacing the entire string, um, just take care to not commit your app config YAML to source control. It may contain passwords that you don't want leaked. So after that, we can actually cancel the running server process with Control C, and then do it again with yarn start. Restart the server with yarn start. After the Backstage frontend launches, you should notice that nothing has changed. So we'll just wait for it, and let's see the front end after the server starts. Okay, looks like we are good. Let's go to home page, and nothing changed. So this is a good sign. If everything is set up correctly above, so this means that the data is flowing from the demo data files directly into your database. You have now made your data persistent in your Backstage database. Let's just quickly verify if the data is present or not. Let's go to the database admin interface. Let's do a quick refresh. Let's go to this, and we have all these databases created, and we can explore these catalog items here. And let's go to tables. We have these tables. Let's see locations and explore. And there is one entity entering here. final entities. Let's check this out. We have these many entities, and let's go back to our user interface. So this is the components. Let's see API. There is one API, there is one component, there is one group, and so on. Let's say location. These are the locations. I just go to component, and if I go to the detail view of this component, we can see different sections. We'll go in depth into all these sections for various catalog items at a later point. Okay, so that's all. We have configured the database for this Backstage installation. So one of the alternatives is you may not want to install Postgres locally. So the following um, thing will guide you through the other options available here, the alternatives. So one alternative is to use Docker. So you can run Postgres in a Docker container. That is great for local development or getting a Backstage POC up and running quickly. So first we need to pull down the container image. We will use PostgreSQL 17. Check out the Postgres version from the Docker Hub. To pull the image, you can use Docker pull Postgres colon 17.0 bookworm. So that's the latest version. So then we just need to start up the container with Docker run command. So this will run Postgres in the background for you. So, but remember to start it up again when you are rebooting your system. Another option is to use Docker Compose. Another way to run Postgres is to use the Docker Compose. So, so you can write some simple YAML, something similar to this. Let's write a simple YAML for Docker Compose. So let's do Docker Compose Postgres. So this will actually look like something like this. Version maybe 4. And we will have services. So one is Postgres, which will have the image name as Postgres 17.0 bookworm. Environment, you can configure the Postgres user as environment actually has to be like this. And the username is this. And Postgres password is going to be some secret that you will need to use. If you want to set up a time zone, let's say you can use TZ something, maybe like Europe, Stockholm, and PGTZ also. But this is not required. And next part is going to be ports. You will configure ports for the containers. That's going to be 5432 for the container port, and 5432 is for the host port. So this is going to run as a bridge network. So then you would just run a simple command like this: docker compose -f docker compose postgres.yaml. Uh, so if not using Docker Compose, you can actually just pull the image with this command, docker pull postgres 17.0 bookworm, and then to run the Docker container, you need to do docker run -d. -d specifies in the daemon mode. Name we can give anything. I'm going to give the container name as Postgres, and you can say some restart policy. Say always, and port mapping we can give 5432 of the host container to map to 5432 of the host, and we need to give the environment variables such as Postgres password, something like a secret. Just replace your secret here. Stuff this placeholder, and then we'll specify the Postgres image name 17.0 bookworm. So this way you can start the server in a containerized fashion. Okay. So the next steps is we recommend you to go through the authentication mechanism. So that's next. So let's look at authentication. So the main uh, audience for this is the admins and developers. So we'll be walking you through this, how to set up this authentication for your Backstage app using GitHub. After finishing this guide, you will have both working authentication and users in your Backstage app to match to the users logging in. So there are multiple authentication providers available for you to use this Backstage, use it with Backstage. So feel free to follow the instructions in the documentation. So the default Backstage app comes with a guest sign-in resolver. This resolver makes all users share a single guest identity and is only intended as a minimum requirement to quickly get up and running. So you can read more about how sign-in resolvers play a role in creating a Backstage user identity for logged-in users. So let's start by setting up authentication. So for this, we choose to use GitHub, a free service most of you might be familiar with. And we'll be using an OAuth app for detailed options. Check out the documentation, GitHub auth provided documentation. So we have to go to this URL, https://github.com/settings applications new. So this is actually going to create a new GitHub application, OAuth application. So this is used to create your OAuth app. The homepage URL should point to Backstage, Backstage's front-end URL. In our tutorial, it will be like something like HTTPS. Let's say so. Homepage URL is going to be HTTPS or HTTP localhost 3000, and authorization callback URL should be something like this: authorization callback URL should be something like this. So in our installation, it's going to be localhost 3000. Oh, sorry. It should be pointing to the backend port, which is 7007, and the URL path is api/auth/github/handler/frame. So these are the properties that we need to use while creating your OAuth application in GitHub. So let's go to this URL. Let's figure this out. So if I go here, it will allow me to create a new application. Once the application is created, take note of the client ID and client secret. So let's just say we'll create an example Backstage app. So let's use Backstage tutorial as a application name, and we'll use HTTP 127.0.0.1 and then 3000. And authorization callback, I'm going to use HTTP on localhost 7007 API/auth GitHub handler frame. So probably we can use localhost here and check this out. So register an application. All right. We need this client ID and client secret we need to generate. So let's copy these. I'm noting down this in my README file, and I'm going to generate a new secret. So this will create a new secret, and this secret I can copy. And secret is going to be this particular thing. I can click on this and it will copy. All right, we got it. And take note of this client ID and the client secret. You can generate a new client secret will generate the secret. So next step is to open our app config and add this client ID and client secret in this file. So it should end up looking like this. I will show you that. Let's go here to app config. So this is going to have authentication section right here, and we have guest authentication here, and we will add one more authentication provider, GitHub, and then it's going to be a development dependency. So client ID, we will use the one that we copied, and then we'll use client secret. This one, and that's it. And we need to do one more thing. So we need to add sign-in option to the front-end application. Right now, we don't have any options in the front end to show to login. The next step is to change the sign-in page. For this, you'll actually need to write some code. So let's open app26 from packages, app, source, app26. Here, let's go to, let's just import the plugin, GitHub API out plugin. So let's go here and add a line, import GitHub Auth API reference, run Backstage, core plugin API. And we can use this in the create app section just below it. We can go scroll down and create app as these components. So we have components here. Sign in page will by default use guest. So we need to change this to use GitHub. So let's comment out this portion of it. And let's create a code like this. Sign in page is going to be a function, anonymous function, and it's going to return the sign in page component. But we need to also specify. So we need to specify the properties and so on. Let's just move this section below so that it's clear what we're doing. Let's indent it a little bit. And we need the props also here. And then we need to do all this stuff. Providers is going to be an array, is an object. And this is going to have ID as GitHub auth provider. So by default, it's the guest authentication that they use. And we will use a title for this, GitHub. And then some authentication message, sign in using GitHub. And API reference is going to be the one that we imported, GitHub auth API reference. Let's copy this from here to here. Okay, what's wrong? Let's just uncomment this and let's use this itself. Just change this to the syntax, indent it a little bit. Let's use auto itself and then providers. And that's all. And instead of this, We're just going to use this. Don't need this anymore. Hmm. Okay, so it should be an array. All right, let's revert and see where we are doing. Okay, I'm missing this closing part. Okay, understood. So instead of this, we are going to use the object syntax. ID is going to be GitHub auth provider. Title is GitHub message. We use sign in using GitHub. And then repeat the reference, same as before. Okay, okay, this has to be an array, I guess. All right, that's all set. Then let's add sign-in resolvers. So next we need to add the sign-in resolvers to our configuration. So let's go to app config, and inside the auth section, we already have it. And this is auth providers, but we need to have auth section also. It is the providers. Then you select the environment here. We'll just say inside this place. Let's go sign in. Let's just say resolvers. So this should match the resolver as username matching user entity. So this is nothing but the username that is mapped should map to the username in the catalog. So that details will be known in the later sections of this tutorial. All right. So, okay. What this will do is take the user details provided by the auth provider and match that against a user in the catalog. So in this case, username matching user entity name will match the GitHub username with the metadata.name value of a user in the catalog. So if none is found, we will get an failed to sign in, unable to resolve user identity message. So we'll cover this in the next section. So now is the time to add the auth provider to the backend. So to add the auth provider to the backend, we will first need to install the package by running this command. So let's do that with yarn package packages backend add backstage slash plugin auth backend module GitHub provider. So then we will need to add this line also, one more line to the index file, backend index. So this just added the package into the package JSON, and then inside the backend index file, we need to add one entry here. So all the way to the bottom, so let's go add after the auth backend. Let's add so we can add more buttons here. So backend dot add. We need to import the newly installed package backstage slash plugin auth backend module GitHub provider. And that's it. Now we can go ahead and restart the server. Restart Backstage from the terminal by stopping it with Control C if it's already running, and then issue yarn start. So it should be welcomed by a login prompt next time you go to the UI. So if you try to log in at this point, you will get a fail to sign in, unable to resolve user identity message. So we will fix that in some time. So before that, let's go check the interface. It will take some time to compile and load. So now we have the GitHub authentication mechanism. So if I click on sign in, it will ask me to authorize, and then login failed because we don't have a username that is corresponding to the catalog entity. So, so let's add the user. So adding a user. So the recommended approach for adding users and groups into catalog is to use one of the existing org entity providers like the one in the example, or if those don't work, you may need to create one that fits your organization's needs. For the sake of this guide, we'll simply step you through the adding a user to the org.yaml file that is included when you create a new Backstage instance. Let's do that. So first let's go back to our code. Let's open the examples org.yaml. So let's go to examples org.yaml. So we have this section. So name is guest user and member of guests. Now make sure to replace the text GitHub username or this guest user with your GitHub username. So this time I'm going to use a name, my GitHub username. So this is the one, and that's it. Let's restart the Backstage from the terminal once more by stopping it with Control C and then doing a Control C and then doing a yarn start. So you should now be able to log in to Backstage and see items in the catalog. So let's go back to our browser. Let it load. To learn more about authentication in Backstage, there are some references in the documentation, such as authentication in Backstage using organizational data from GitHub and so on. So you can also set up GitHub integration. So the GitHub integration supports loading catalog entities from GitHub or GitHub Enterprise. So let's try logging in here. It still fails because my GitHub username. Let's see. Okay. Something might be wrong. So, but the GitHub integration supports loading catalog entities from GitHub and GitHub Enterprise. So entities can be added to static catalog configuration registered with the catalog import plugin, or it can be discovered from a GitHub organization also. So users and groups can also be loaded from an organization either by using GitHub or using GitHub apps. It might be the best way to set up integrations for this tutorial. So you'll be using personal access tokens in this tutorial. So create your personal access token by going to your GitHub token creation page. Use a name to identify this token and put it in the notes field. Choose a number of days for expiration. If you have a hard time picking a number, we suggest to use 7 days. It's a good number that we will look into next. Let's go to your username. Settings, developer settings. We can go to personal access token and we can choose classic token. We can create a new token and you can give a name. Let's say Backstage tutorial. We can give 7 days by default. I'm just going to give all permissions. So I got the token. Let's note this down here. Okay, set the scope to your liking, but I have selected all. For this tutorial, you will need to select repo and workflow is required, as the scaffolding job in this guide configures a GitHub action workflow for the newly created project. So for this tutorial, we'll be writing the token to app config local YAML. So this file might not exist for you. So if it doesn't, go ahead and create it along the app config YAML at the root of the project. So this file should also be excluded in the git ignore to avoid accidentally committing your credentials into the SVN. So more details on this file can be found in the documentation. So in our app, let's go let's go to our code inside the app config local. We have this, and we need to specify integrations. And let's add GitHub here, host as github.com, and then token going to be the whatever token that updates from there. That's it. That's settled. This information will be leveraged by other plugins. So if you're looking for a more production way to manage these secrets, then you can do the following, with the token being stored in a environment variable, just like dollar GitHub token. So that's one way. If you have updated the configuration for your integration, it's likely that the backend will need a restart to apply these changes. To do this, stop the running instance in your terminal with Control C and start it again with yarn start. So once the backend has restarted, you can retry the operation. So that's about it. So let's debug why the login is failing. Okay, it's now working. All right, that's about it.